they changed it or something. Here we are today. So thank you all and welcome. I'm Catherine Wygant Fawcett, the Executive Director of the IFOB, or Institute for Family-Owned Business. Many of you, almost all of you know me. And we have Brooke Stewart, our Director of Communications here. She's going to be our technical assistant and chat person today. Thank you to KeyBank for being our title sponsor. And thank you to Maine HR Convention with Katie Jones here as a sponsor and Maine Biz. She'll be saying a few words in a few minutes. We've muted everyone and we turned off your video, but we turned it back on. So if you want to have a video, please have a video. That's lovely to see you. We'll be recording this for later viewing, and we'll provide the slides and the workbook for you all in our follow-up email. I want to make this as interactive as possible, so please send your chats in or questions to the chat with Brooke, and she'll be monitoring that with you. Towards the end of the program, we'll be putting a link to a survey in the chat. Please fill out the survey, as this is how we build our programs and how we got here today. As many of you know, the IFOB is a nonprofit that helps family businesses succeed, and we've added many online programs, and we really hope to be able to open up later this fall. We work with CEOs, we work with women in family business, the next generation, and leaders in transition. Our next program is next Thursday, April 29th, in our new series called Legal Lunches. The topic is Never Say Goodbye, Employee Performance Reviews, Terminations, and Alternatives. So we'll have a legal expert, Laura Rideout. She's a partner with Pretty Flaherty to give us the best practices. And then we have Dottie Chalmers-Cutter, the VP of Operations from Chalmers Insurance Group, and she'll give us the real life experiences for people in a family business. Our next how-tos is a virtual selling program on May 13th, and you can sign up for those at fambusiness.org, or you can message Brooke in the chat and she'll set that up for you. And nominations are now open for our awards. So if you know any family businesses, please do nominate them and they'll know that you recognize them. And mark your calendars for October 6th, as we'll celebrate in an in-person and virtual program and announce the winners live, like the Oscars. So today we have a very special guest, Dan Steininger. He's a former CEO of a major financial institution that increased revenues by exceeding $2 billion. He was the chair of the Wisconsin YPO, Young Presidents Organization. YPO Gold is largely composed of family businesses, and he's worked with those businesses for decades to help them be more creative and innovative. So as he tells me, he feels your pain. And he's also a COVID survivor. So he had to use he'll tell you about his innovate or die and how that is really relevant today. And we're looking forward to hearing his stories and having him teach us his secret sauce. So next, I'll invite Katie Jones, our director of Maine HR Convention, to say a few words, and we'll toss it over to Dan.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. We're big supporters of IFOB as a family-owned business ourselves. The Maine HR Convention is the largest HR event in the state of Maine, and coming up the second week of May 6th through the 14th. We are big believers that everyone should have access to great, progressive, creative HR resources, training, education. And we know it's been a particularly difficult year. So we've launched a scholarship program to help small businesses, family-owned businesses, and nonprofits get access to that training. You can visit us at mainehrconvention.com for more information, or shoot me a message in the chat. Catherine and Brooke are going to be joining us this year to host a little family feud game Wednesday of our convention for some after hours fun. So we look forward to seeing everyone there.
Yeah. And thank you to all our sponsors. And now I'll turn it over to Dan. And if you'd like, I can start the show. Would you like that?
Thank you, Catherine. By the way, Katie, I appreciate HR people. My VP of HR probably kept me out of jail.
They're important people to have on your side.
The soul of any company is its people. And I learned early on, make sure I had a great HR leadership and a good team in place. So thank you. Let's wake everybody up at this early hour. I think we have a little bit of wake up clip.
So how-tos, and then our agenda. Here's Dan. moving mountains every day. And
Did that wake everybody up? Anyhow, that's too, you've been asked to let's just talk informally because I love to interact with people and tap your brain power. In the last decade of your life, as you think back, how have you changed things you do because of new technology? I mean, forcing you to be more creative. So, I mean, I know for myself, I used to rely on maps. I get in a car now, I put in GPS and I don't even know how to read a map anymore. So it's one way my life has changed. What are some examples that you can think about in your daily life? It's totally different, requiring you to do things different than you did before. And there's no right answer, whatever comes to your mind.
I've learned how to communicate with my kids with little images instead of spoken words.
Interesting. And what do you use to do that? What technology?
Oh, I'm talking about their whole world is texting. So, emojis instead of, complete sentences or verbal communications.
Does anyone still have landlines?
No, but that does remind me, I was going to say, I don't memorize phone numbers anymore. They're all stored in my phone. I couldn't tell you what my mother's cell phone number is.
Oh. And what will we do without speed dial, right? I mean, other examples, just things that you think about every day. Where do you get your news? How do you get it? What's changed for you?
Probably the biggest change is doing work in the car. The days of throwing the old bag phone on the dashboard to get better signal. I think we do more in the car than we ever used to because of the voice control.
It's a good point. Even all the new cars now have the ability to just continue to plug into your own contact base so you can conduct phone calls while you're driving. It's good. It's the good and the bad,
I can
Just
find
talking
myself
with,
shopping for things at any time during the day. So like if I need something, I can just do it like in the middle of a conference call and say, oh, I need laundry detergent, and I can order it and have it here in 2 days. So, as opposed to going to the store, finding the time. So multitasking has increased a lot for me in the last decade.
And can you imagine, Kim, going back a decade ago that you would have just said, oh, I'm not going to go to a store. I'm just going to press a few buttons and it's going to deliver my door. You would have thought, yeah, what are you drinking, right? And the other thing that's amazing about whether it's Amazon or whatever vehicle you use, they have customer reviews, so you can read how other people used or didn't like the product.
The ability to find a video to fix just about anything. So your washer stops working, or you got to replace a headlight on a car, you just YouTube it and go from there.
It is amazing. Even my golf game has been helped through YouTube. It is ingenious what they do. It's mind-boggling. So anything
One
else
of the
that
things
comes?
we've been able to do is my daughter has got a disadvantaged our granddaughter is a 1.5-year-old, and she requires 24-hour care. So we've been able to, without taking extra time off, my wife is retired, but I've been able to work from their house 3 states away. We go there about once a month. I'm able to work from their house. My wife is able to provide respite care. So those are the kinds of things, without this technology, I probably would have left my current employment. We probably would end up moving, but now we're able to kind of reach that balance where for now, at least, we're going to stay put where we are, but we're still able to be there for our kids and provide.
It's really it's almost miraculous when you think about it. It helps the child, and yet you keep your employment, and you didn't have to make some of the hardest choices in life that you would ever had to make. How fascinating. So, Well, every one of those examples you gave, of course, required all of you to develop different kinds of skills on how to create the world. And that shows that you understand creativity. I always find it fascinating that when you call just to get a, one of your prescriptions at a pharmacy, you're rarely talking to a real person. You're talking to a robot and placing orders through robots. You're having full conversations with non-humans. So when I ask you, who comes to mind when I ask you, who do you think, Steve Jobs was obviously very creative. Who do you think about when I ask who are creative people? What comes to mind in your mind? A person, a profession, what just comes to mind? There's no right or wrong answer. Just take a shot at it.
Bob Marley, the singer, comedian. He's a guy in Maine who has very funny commercial stints and things that he does.
So an entertainer, right?
He's a comedian.
Comedian.
Yep.
That requires real creativity to keep an audience alive. Any other examples of who you think would be creative?
Think of like Richard Branson or Elon Musk.
Elon Musk, Richard Branson, these are real geniuses that are thinking how to change the world. It's interesting that now if I asked you, and you don't have to answer this, if I went to your friends and asked them, are you, using your name, is that person are they a really creative person? How would your friends describe you? And so don't answer it, you can do it silently, but my promise to you today is whether you think of yourself as creative or not, is to start you on a journey where you can and will become a very creative person. Creativity is like any other skill. You can learn any skill, whether it's learning to play a piano, a new language, whatever that skill is. Creativity is no different. There's certain basics to becoming a creative person, living a creative life that you can do. And so it can happen. And what I'm going to focus on today is personal creativity. I mean, there's two kinds of creativity, the kind you do within the work context, where you're innovative, you're driving innovation in an organization. And I work with family businesses time and time again, because they really require creativity. But I'm starting on the personal level. And why that? Because all over the world, CEOs are saying to their employees, we want you to think outside the box. Well, how do you think outside the box at work if you're not personally creative in your own life? So my promise today is to start you on that journey, to share the secret sauce of creativity so that you, in fact, will eventually be described as a creative person. So let's begin at the beginning. That's my promise to you. So Brooke, our next slide, or whoever's doing the slides. There we go. Mountains, what's this got to do with creativity? In my youth, I went to school in Boston and hiked a lot of the mountains in New England, but in undergraduate, I would hop a train and go across the northern part of the United States, including eastern Montana, till I got to the Rocky Mountains. And the first time you see the Rocky Mountains, you're just awed. It's such a different out-of-body experience. And then I got to thinking, and I worked in Glacier National Park my summers. It's a great job for a college kid. The problem I thought about mountains as I got there, what if Lewis and Clark saw that for the first time, saw the Rocky Mountains? They're on the way to the Pacific Ocean. And now there's this barrier known as the Rocky Mountains. What do you do? So they had to figure a way to navigate, like all mountains. How do you get around it? How do you traverse it? How do you avoid it? And they eventually succeeded. But so mountains, is the way I describe it, are those problems and challenges that come with everyday living. If you have no problems or challenges, you're leading a very special life. But for most of us mortals, we all have problems and challenges. And they require us to be creative. Getting into the financial services business, I can really relate. It requires a high degree of creativity. That's the mountains. So let me give you a true story about these problems and challenges that get thrown at us all the time. So the next slide. This is a picture of the World Trade Center back on 9/11, where the plane is about to hit the South Tower. And this is a true story. a woman known as Maria, her name was Maria Penglos, that she was working on the 98th floor of the North Building, and you could see that they couldn't see the plane. She had a meeting scheduled for 9 o'clock that morning. That plane hit around 8:30. The second it hit, she felt this wave of heat go through the offices. She got up immediately and headed for the exit. She didn't even take her purse. And as she's going to the exit, fellow employees on that floor were saying, "What's wrong? Why are you going? We got a meeting. Where are you going?" And they're checking their cell phones, trying to figure out what's going on. She got to the stairwell, started down, and after a few floors, another person joined her, another woman, and they went a few more floors, and that other woman said, "Whoop, I forgot pictures of my grandkids and her children," and went back. The reason I tell you that story is Maria was the only person who survived from that day in that office. She had the creativity to break a normal pattern and do something. I can personally relate because a little over a year ago, I ended up getting COVID, and I'll never forget the first night in the hospital. I mean, after everybody telling me I didn't have COVID and the test that I didn't, I kept getting worse and worse. So that night in the hospital, 11:30, in comes a doctor and says, "Your oxygen levels are so bad, we may have to put you in the IC unit tonight and intubate you." And I said, "Well, you got to do what you got to do." And he said, "Well, the problem is most people don't come out alive." And I said, "Would you run that one by me again?" So we need a cell phone number to call in case we have to have a life-ending decision. And so I thought, well, I could give my wife's cell number, but she said I've been acting up lately. But eventually I did give him the number. I got through the night without needing intubation. And for the next 2 weeks, every doctor who saw me, and I had multiple doctors, absolutely nobody knew, this is March of last year, what to do with COVID people. Nothing. No one had treated what you're supposed to do. So I'm sitting on the internet, once I could function enough, in my hospital bed, developing and researching this disease. And every day when a doctor would come in, I'd have a whole set of questions. All those things helped me survive COVID. Even when I got home, and I managed to get home, and you need an oxygen tank to breathe, it stopped working. And so I ended up needing all of my creativity skills to survive. So what I share with you about creativity is something that can really save your life. And not only as a person, but the column I write for the Biz Times is called Innovate or Die. And I can tell you family businesses who have survived this pandemic and prospered, some are no longer with us. So there's a lot riding on getting creativity right. So let's go to the next slide. Just give you the overview. Charles Darwin, you have all heard of. It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones that are most responsive to change. Now, that's important because all of us in this room today would not be here if it weren't for ancestors we had who did something right to help us survive as a family unit. So let's look at the world we live in real quickly, and we've talked about it a little this morning. Next slide. This is what the world looks like since, well, 10,000 years ago, when we were hunter-gatherers running out on the plains of East Africa, and before we started moving north into Europe and elsewhere. We started with agriculture, then invented pottery, started finding it irrigation, and then started creating language and mathematics. And then around 1800 with the Industrial Revolution, you can see what the world has changed. You got the creation of engines, railroads, germ telephones, automobiles, Industrial Revolution, and now nuclear energy, high-speed computers. We landed on the moon, internet. And here's another about the rate of change. In the next 5 years, you will see your lives change more than they have in the last 30. You've got 5 things going on right now: artificial intelligence, robotics, synthetic biology. These things are so dramatically changing our world. So creativity is really critical to our growth as humans and in our family businesses. So let's step back now and ask ourselves a little bit about how hard is this to do? And so we can have the next slide. So I ask my question to you. For all of us who've had kids or grandkids, do you ever have to teach them how to play with toys? No, right? And did you ever have to teach them how to crawl? Right? Or how about the most complex activity all of us will ever do in our lifetime, talk. Did any of you have to insist that your children or grandchildren had to talk, and if they don't do it, they weren't going to eat supper? What did you find? Right? They do this naturally. So we as a species are naturally creative. You put toys in front of kids, they start playing. They want to talk. They want to start to walk and crawl. My question to you is, what happened when we were young? We were so naturally creative. What happens to us as we grow older? We get less creative. Does anyone have any ideas? There's no right or wrong answers. What do you think happens that we lose some of that creative spontaneity as we grow older?
Judgment.
Judgment, but from fellow workers, right? Right. Who else judges us?
Ourselves.
Ourselves. What else takes creativity away from us as people?
Failures.
Oh, yeah. Now, and Jeff, talk about like give me an example of failure in the work context, in school. Where
I think that you try something new and it doesn't work out, or it's a bad experience, and so you think, well, I'm not going to try anything new anymore. I'm just going to do what everyone else does because it's safe and it's easy.
That's excellent. Yeah, you experienced the pain of failure when you tried something differently. Excellent. Any other sources of why are we less creative as we grow older?
I'm going to say institutions. You know, and institutions can include parents and families as well as employers and schools, and they're just certain ways of doing things, let's say, and that there's pressure to fit in and comply with the way things are done, and it can take a lot of courage to step out of that.
Steve, having worked for a global bank or yourself, you know that you would not show up for work and say, I think we ought to do things totally different. Sorry, boss, I have a different way of doing things. What would happen to you? Right? Or school. And Steve, to your point, institution, what about school? When you studied in the early grades, can you tell your teacher, no, I don't think I like the way those multiple or those addition tables go. I've got a different idea how to add and subtract, right? What happens, right? It's institutions. You sort of have to conform to advance, right? So what happens as we grow older, you're absolutely right. We get to school, you have to get the right answer, you get within the work context, you have to do what the boss requires. Otherwise, you're not gonna last in that job very often. So those are real reasons. There's another reasons that we get less creative as we go older. It's called our habits. So everybody just do this for yourself. Just cross your arms. This is not hard to do. This is not complex, right? Okay, now do it the other way. Unless you're totally ambidextrous, it feels less comfortable, right? So we also have habits. If you put the next slide, habits really they're very important for us to get through the day. I mean, if you had to go somewhere today and get in a car, you know how to start that car. You have a habit of doing it right. If you had to relearn how to start a car every time, it would take a long time to get anywhere. So habits are very important to our survival, but habits also hardwire us against creativity and change. And let me give you another good example of this, because our brains start to get trained to see it. The next slide. Our brains start to see the world differently based upon our habits. I'm sure many of you have seen this. You know, the lines one looks shorter and longer, but to our brains, they look longer and shorter. We know ultimately they're the same, but actually in a whole different sort of way, we start to see reality from our own brain perspective, and it does start to shape our view of the world. So the question is, there's good news. So let's put the next slide up. And this is important for all of us. Since the founding of neuroscience in the last 20, 30 years, where neuroscientists who study the brain, because of things we have like PET scans and MRIs, they can see inside the brain. This is something they never were able to do before. We used to think we were born with 5 billion brain cells or whatever it was, and you slowly lose them and then you die. Well, what they have found out as they've studied the brain, and this is really important to all of us, is that as you grow and you take on creative challenges, you can actually grow new connections in your brains. And there's connections between neurons called synapses, and it's called neuroplasticity. Our brains are capable of changing, growing. You can grow new connections called synapses between these neurons. So maybe like 850 million neurons in our brain, but there's up to a trillion connections in that 3.5 pound thing that's in your brain. Every second is firing back and forth between neurons for you to think. So the fantastic part of what they've discovered is that we can shape our brains, we can actually improve our brains, we can improve our cognitive abilities as we get older. So that's really, really important. That means there's hope for all of us. And the question is, how do we do it? So if you could put the next slide up. How do we get creative? Because the key to growing new connections in our brains and stimulating neurons is creativity. You can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and expect your brains to get more creative, more and add neuron connections and so forth. You literally have to do and engage in creative activity. So now we'll get to the secret sauce. And that's the next slide. Ingredient number 1. What do you have to do to get creative? And it begins with, as a person, leading a more creative life. What can you do to be a more creative life? And the first thing is curiosity. And now we all know curiosity killed the cat. But I have, if you look at the workbook, if you printed it up, you can take a look at the first page. This will be your cookbook, okay? And literally, what I'd like all of you to do, and I'm just a firm believer in interactive things, that you take this with you, print it up, and start your own little exercise in creativity. And it starts with, what are you going to do to lead a more creative life? Show more curiosity about the world. Let me give you a good example. For example, there's an app now called Duolingo. I have a daughter-in-law who's originally from Colombia, South America. She speaks fluent English, but she also speaks fluent Spanish. Well, I want to communicate with her in Spanish. So Duolingo on my cell phone, I can take, a Spanish lesson every day. Can you start listening, take a minute to start writing down some things where you can, or share with each other ideas where you can lead you can be more curious about the world. What could you do differently that would make you engage in more curiosity every day? What comes to mind? And there's no right or wrong answer. Something that you might do to make life a little more interesting or curious.
And here we're going to consider any new books, periodicals, webinars, audiobooks, lectures, maybe a new TV show or a place that you visited to help spark that creativity or curiosity.
Do any of you listen to audiobooks when you're walking? Steve mentioned that, right? Steve, you've gotten ideas from there?
I listen to mostly podcasts, but there's some very creative folks on there. One thing that we're doing as a firm is we identified sort of what issues are most important to us just in our lives, and we're watching documentaries, we're getting guest speakers, and learning as a group about this. So it sort of starts with learning, being curious about something. Today, for example, we've got Don Perkins from the Gulf of Maine Research Institute talking about climate change. So it's, that we're trying to foster that as an organization, and not just stop with the curiosity or the learning, but then turn that into action.
And that's the gold standard, Steve, what you're doing. It doesn't have to have an immediate answer to anything, but it stimulates you to see the world and see different ideas. That's terrific. What a great concept. And put that, what you're helping is to create an innovative work environment in your own organization. And because there are no simple answers in the world of business. Any other ideas that people have tried or think about that could, I love your little shed there. To me, that's a dedication to creativity, to have your little, away from the kids, and I love it. It's a great, that alone is a good physical statement to how to get away and see something, the world from a different vantage point. Let me ask all of you, if you go to a cocktail party or you're golfing with somebody, you're at a lunch, and this is a new person you've never ever met before and you're introduced, how might you engage a conversation with that person? If you're, go ahead.
Again, it's just gonna look different than it did in 2019.
Jean, you can go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna answer the other question. I'm on an iPad, so I can't see anybody. Are we able to see each other if we're on a computer? Or we're
We
just
can
seeing
see you.
live?
We can see you.
can
You
see
have your
you.
hand lowered.
We can see you, right?
Your hand.
Okay.
I'll take that.
No, I was just gonna ask about volunteering within the community, because I just think that you can learn so much from other places and hearing about perhaps challenges organizations have, or, you know, things that they do. So I think that can make you a much more creative person.
And Jean, that's a great point, because everybody needs volunteers. And yet, as you say, you learn about a whole segment of society or people or challenges that you didn't even know existed. And that helps your mind grow creatively. It helps you grow a perspective of the world.
But when you said, how do you foster this as an organization? That's something that I struggle with, because we seem to have, you know, a nucleus of people that are always willing to volunteer and to take classes and do all the different things that we throw out there. And then there's a lot of people who just don't. They're not interested. They don't want to. You know, continuing education is not of interest to them. So I just don't know how to foster that.
Well, and Jean, we can talk separately on that. Today, I'm focusing on personal creativity for each of you. I do specific workshops for organizations, you know, boot camps, I call them, you know, morning, we set aside a morning and leave people with the tools of innovation and organization. They have no choice. It gives you a framework for all meetings and how to conduct an organization and drive innovation within an organization. And believe me, family businesses have a set of challenges that are really unique. And you have to have those tools in play to drive innovation and creativity in organization. But let's get back to the person you met for the first time in a group setting. How would you best engage that person if you were really curious?
I like to ask them about themselves. It seems like when you're kind of stuck in a group or learning or meeting someone for the first time, it's easier to get them to talk about themselves because it's comfortable for them. So usually asking about them, I'll learn more, not only from that person, but the people in the group and how they interact and react to that person speaking. I like to be that type of person that sits on the outside and observes. So that's, if I'm stuck with a quiet group, I usually ask someone specific questions so they talk about themselves.
You really hit it, because people love talking about themselves. I ask people, so what planet did you come from? And, you know, an hour later, one thing you all want to test yourself as, and Steve, for the businesses you're in, people love to talk about themselves. One thing that always strikes me when I'm in a situation or I do a golf round with somebody I don't know, when we finish, I realize how much I know about that person. 98% of the time, they know absolutely nothing about me, literally nothing. Isn't it interesting? So do that test for you sometime. Have a, you know, when the next cocktail, you'll meet somebody new, start as she said, ask them questions, have a background, and that leads to more interesting questions. But when you're all finished and you say goodbye, ask yourself, do they know anything about you? So it's just always fascinated me. So, okay, so start to think of things, take this cookbook home with you and start adding things that in your life will make you can exercise curiosity. All right, the next overhead, Solitude. A woman wrote a book, Into the Wild. I think she you know, hiked about 1,000 miles. The value of solitude in a world that we're constantly being bombarded with things is that and when you're quiet, or like your woman cave, I call it, you need to block out the world. Our brains, right here is the hypothalamus. It has an executive function. We have incoming, we're seeing advertisements, cars coming at us, things going on all day long. That executive brain is managing our environment and stopping the overflow and trying to organize it. The problem with that is it doesn't allow for a lot of creativity. Once you have solitude, or if you're daydreaming, or if you're sleeping, that executive brain gets turned off. And that's when creativity starts to happen. Let me ask all of you, when do creative ideas come to you? Steve Jobs was famous for saying, I go for walks. That's when I get creative. Anybody else, when do you get your creative ideas, or where are you?
In the shower.
Shower. It was something about water and
TMI probably, but I do my best thinking in the shower, and I always have a pad of paper outside of my shower.
It's brilliant. Oh, by the way, I found on Amazon, to the idea you can order it, you can go to Amazon and get little pads that are waterproof, because I'm a swimmer and I finished my lanes and I would finish and I come back and show my assistant, this is brilliant stuff. What did I write here? And the ink had, so
I'm going to multitask and order that right now. So.
Actually, yes, great. You can get them. It's just type in waterproof notepads and and they're not expensive and they work. It's amazing. Where else? So shower, where else do people get ideas?
I get it when I commute and drive from Booth Bay to Portland. I'll ponder
in the car. It's quiet.
about it in the car.
Nobody bugging you, right? Any other ideas where people get ideas from?
Doing yard work or on the lawn.
Yard work. Yeah, yard work, because right, you're focused on, just cutting grass, cleaning up the lawn, whatever it might be. It turns off the executive brain so creativity can come through. So finding things where you can daydream or have solitude is important. Next overhead, next slide. Daydreaming, and I want to add to this sleep. Let me stress with all of you the importance of sleep. Sleep is very critical. Have any of you ever had nightmares when you're sleeping? Right? You know why? When you're sleeping, again, your executive function of your brain gets turned off. When that happens, now your brain goes crazy. Things that you don't have a governor on it anymore. So when you have nightmares, it's a reflection of the fact that your executive brain is letting your mind go crazy and you end up getting some pretty scary situations. But does anyone wake up in the morning and have some ideas that come to them that they didn't have before they went to bed?
Or in the middle of the night.
Or in the middle of the night, right? I keep a small dictaphone close by. It really, the brain is processing information at night and creative ideas are coming out. So sleep is really critical to the creative process. And you do and will get a lot of creative ideas just by sleeping. And so value your sleep and recognize that's an opportunity for new ideas to come to you. Another one is humor. And we played a little humor this morning. The next slide, Brooke, Catherine. Humor is very, very important. I think we have a slide. Do we have the humor slide embedded here, Catherine? I can't remember.
Yeah, do you want me to play it?
You can play one. Yeah, let's
Das
play
hier
it.
ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Küstenwächters. Das Gerät und das Gerät. Überlebensradar.
This is the German Coast Guard.
Mayday, mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
Now, if you click to the next slide, and this is really important to all of us. In our brains, we got a left brain, right brain hemisphere. They connect all the time. The left brain is this analytical part with mathematics, science, and logic. The right brain is the source of most creativity. What humor does is move you from your left brain into your right brain. And so Steve, at work and for all of these in work family businesses, can you build video humor into your workplace? Because as you, in meetings, humor is so critical to the creative process. It goes back in the hunter-gatherer days, thousands of years ago. If you saw what might be a potential enemy coming across the plains, armed, what people ended up doing is using humor to determine whether or not that person coming at them was going to try to kill them or be a friend. So, and in the workplace, humor does an amazing job of leveling people and, reducing the political barriers and all the politics that go into organizations, because humor kind of brings us together. And in family and businesses, where you frequently have family, you know, let's face it, emotions that go on between siblings, between parents. Oh, yeah. Humor does a great job of bringing people together and allow them to work together. So build as much as you can humor into your organizations, into your daily life. I try to watch some funny clips before I go to bed at night. Humor is a really important part of how we are creative. Does that make a certain amount of sense? Right? You know, when I see people working on my street out in front of my house or something, now how do you go out and, you know, relate, or the guys who pick up our garbage collection, how do you go relate to them? You go out and you just say something funny about the football team that just lost or whatever. Within seconds, they're connecting with you and figure you're not a bad person, even though you're from different social status. So it's something to keep in mind as you build humor into your life personally. So, all right, now we have been through the importance of humor. One other thing to shake you before, this is again, the ingredients, each ingredient of a creative life. The next slide. The last thing I want to emphasize with all of you, exercise. Neuroscientists have found out that, you know, we used to think our bodies, we should stay in shape. It's important. Great. What they have now found is that your body has an impact on your mind. In other words, when you exercise, it's not just good for your body, it's good for your mind. It releases endorphins into the mind. It stimulates blood flow into the brain. That brain, to grow and be creative and develop, needs exercise. So when you're thinking about being a more creative person, add exercise to your daily routine. I don't care if it's just walking, going upstairs, doing anything, gardening, as you've mentioned, anything that adds, I'm a swimmer, anything that adds exercise, because it isn't just good for your body. It helps develop your brain. And the more you do that, it's going to protect you as you get older. So, okay, we are now, that's the sort of ingredients of leading a creative life. And you can put these things in your book and your recipe book here and keep adding to them. Now, let's get down to the actual, if you got all the ingredients, now how do you make a cake, right? You got to pull it together and produce something. So what this little booklet is also has the tools of solving your mountains, your daily challenges, your opportunities. And it begins with, and here it is. So let's get real. Here's the take home value and take it with you for sure. All creativity starts with a problem. I mean, if it was a cell phone, what problem was it solving? We're tethered to landlines. GPS, we're tethered to maps. Everything you talk about started with some opportunity, some entrepreneur deciding that there's a problem that's not being solved. There's an opportunity worth being. So the first thing is to find your mountain. What is the problem, the mountain that you are going to try to solve? I don't care what it is. My wife and I were recently trying to redecorate our living room. Okay, what's the big deal, right? And we had paint swaths all over the walls, and it was suddenly going downhill fast. And I finally said, you know, our marriage may not survive this remodeling. So we did what I did. We started putting ideas in play, came up with the fact there were 3 interior designers and like 6 blocks of us, had one, picked one, came over, and within an hour, she had the entire problem solved. And I asked her, do you do divorce counseling on the side? So, but the point is, begin today to finding what is the problem that you want to solve. What's the habit you want to break? Here, the next slide will give you some ideas. I don't care, you can't get out of bed in the morning, it may be eating habits. There's me, not really me, but there's someone on St. Patrick's Day. What is the habit you want to break? What's the challenge you want to take out? Do it today. Put down something in this book right there under number 1, your mountain. Put it in writing and make a determination. You're going to solve it one way or the other. Does that make sense? Okay, so you got it. Step 2, which is next thing, is we as Americans are hardwired to solve things quickly. And Steve, I was really taken by the fact that you just step back as an organization and just look at thinking about big issues and learning as a team. Because Americans are, and this is a statement that came from Harry Quadracci, who grew Quadgraphics to largest or second largest printing firm in the world. He used to say, Americans, shoot, ready, aim. We want to go right to solutions. This is the most important thing you can do is step 2, is take the time to understand the problem you're facing and what causes it. So if you look at your workbook, you're going to see this cause and effect diagram. So state what you think is the problem, and then write to yourself right now, ask yourself why. 5 whys, at least 5 times. So let's say you're thinking you need a new car, and you're saying, well, why do I need a new car? So one of the causes might be, well, the current one I have needs to be in the repair shop like every other week. Another cause might be that you've added a teenage driver. Good luck with that, right? So you would fill that in on that, another axis. Another would be you need, there's new technology coming out with cars all the time. They're safer. The car I have, I can't smash into anybody in front of me. It stops me. So maybe it's new technology, or maybe you had a big accident in your car, or you just need a bigger car. So put all of the causes leading to that problem. Take the time to understand the problem before you run to solutions. All right, has everyone got that? And so take this, like I say, and then you can start, and Catherine and I have talked about the importance of take home value and make this your own little recipe book or your own Bible. So, okay, next overhead, or next slide. Now we start the process of ideation. Oh, by the way, one other thing. If you look at your workbook, I have a thing called prioritization in your workbook. Once you have all the causes of the problem, let's say it's trying to buy a car, can you list in order the most important? So let's say the cost of repairs is becoming crazy for the current car you have. So you would put that as the number one reason that you want to solve, causing the problem. And list those in order. And why do I say that in prioritization? Because it tells you what you need to attack first. Whatever it is, you need to prioritize the causes of that problem. And that tells you, not scientifically, but what are the most likely ways to go to solve that problem. So that's in your workbook, and do it. So, okay, next, here's ideation. Okay. Now, Steve, you've already mentioned something. What does everyone think when you got to start solving the problem now and looking for ideas, where are sources of ideas that you can tap to help you come up with ways of solving your problem? What comes to mind? Anybody? Where would you look for solutions to things?
Well, with being a new mom, the first thing I do with questions is go right to Dr. Google.
Yeah, good start. Who mentioned the YouTube clips, right? You can almost YouTube clip every problem on the planet and get sources. Really?
And Google, I was going to say the same thing. For everything, I Google everything. It at least gives you a starting point.
We have such a powerful tool now for ideas. Other things that come to mind, other places of sources of ideas.
Doing a brainstorming session with other people.
And that's important because you get their perspective. All of us see the world from our own perspective. When Abraham Lincoln was shot in Ford's Theater, the government interviewed 240 people who were there that night and came up with 240 versions of what happened. So when you have meetings with other people, they're bringing their perspective, so you're going to get different ideas. What might be some other sources of ideas for ideation?
Social media, the Facebook and LinkedIn has different groups. So depending on what your question might be, you might go to a group like let's say it's sponsorship on LinkedIn, you might have a sponsorship group that you might go to, or even as simple as a mommy group on Facebook. You might go and ask a question, oh, is this normal? And they'll be able to tell you. So I use those a lot.
Wonderful. So we have all these tools now to give us ideas. Let me give you an important point about ideation as you make up your own ideation, your idea list. Two things. Harvard Business School did a study on how, if you put, let's say 20 new ideas in play, you'll end up with 2 or 3 good ones. If you put 100 in play, you'll end up with 20 or 30 good ideas. So as you put ideas down, go for lots of them. Put as many possible ideas. You know, writers talk about putting their manuscript on the shelf. Start a diary or a list of these ideas. Keep coming back to it. Keep coming back. I don't care if it takes 1 day or 2 or 3 weeks. Keep adding things. They may come to you in a shower, when you're walking, or when you're sleeping. Keep adding to your list. The more ideas you put in play on any problem you're trying to solve, the better number of results you get at the end. So another thing, talk to friends, or, you know, when you want to go recommendation for a doctor or a movie, right? Do you talk to other people, right? You know, get recommendations from friends. Sometimes I know in corporations, I've had to facilitate meetings because you don't want the CEO controlling the ideation process because they tend to do what that individual wants to do. By allowing, or the president, whatever it may be, by bringing an outsider to facilitate that, you end up with a bigger list of ideas. Does that make sense? Plugged in? All right, next really important perspective is, now you have the ideas. I don't care if it's 50 or 100. Now, how do you decide what you're going to do? Which idea are you going to pursue? So, and I put this in this booklet. It's called the Evaluation Matrix, in your little cookbook here, to speak. And you write down what are the things that are most in order of priority. How you're going to judge things. If it's a car, it might be the cost. If it's a new product or service at your family business, well, what's the timeline, or how complex it is? How disruptive, or is it incremental? In other words, what are all the things that you're going to use to judge whether you should or shouldn't do a given idea? Does that make sense?
Dan, I got a question on that. I like to look at where's the most leverage, where's the greatest impact, and with you know, possible solutions or just evolving things here, and but sometimes that you know, that answer is, as you put it here, very disruptive. So when do, you know, as leaders, when do we you know, go for the more incremental approach, or the, you know, swing for the fences, real big impact approach?
And that ties in perfectly to this matrix. By segmenting what you are going to judge these things by, it helps you make that decision. So if you've got if you got plenty of time on your hands, then disruptive is a possibility, because you know it's going to disrupt things. But by creating the matrix, if money is tight, you're not going to have as much bandwidth to do disruptive technology. You're probably going to stuck with more incremental. So you need to put the matrix, it's not scientific, Steve, but what it does is it gives you a guide for judging what you ought to do. Again, it's not scientific, but as you do these, here, I'll go to the next overhead just to give you their slide. Once you got the criteria, you list those on the left-hand side, and then you put all your options. So option C might be the disruptive. Option A is incremental. I'm using a simple car example. So if cost is the most important, you weight that as a 5. It's the highest on a 1 to 5. You weight these depending on how important they are. And guess what? When you total them at the end, you'll see what pops out as the most likely way you should go. Okay. Now, obviously, in the work context, and that's why I do workshops with family businesses, we get more sophisticated on these evaluation matrices and so forth. I'm keeping it really simple because this is personal creativity. But this, and you can just fill it out. Once you get to whatever problem you're trying to solve. You take this thing and put in your own little matrix and then put numbers on it and see what pops out at the bottom. Does that make sense to you?
It does make sense, but if you'll allow me, can I give you just a little bit of pushback so that I can learn?
I love it.
You know, if we're trying to foster creativity in ourselves and in others, if we then apply a logical matrix with a scoring system, that seems to run counter to the concept of creativity. And there are probably times, you know, the people that really disrupt the world in a positive sense, you know, they say screw it to reliability or cost or, you know, other things. You know, those could be zeros on your scoring system, but in terms of impact, they change the world. So, you know, is there an override here? The matrix seems to inhibit some of that creativity.
Well said. Put the next slide in front of you, and this will solve, because you really went to the heart of disruptive innovation. And having worked with many early stage companies and invested in some and lose money in others, how do you decide to bank on disruptive versus incremental? Okay, this is a simple way of doing it. Green, the simple ones that are easy to implement. Blue is study more. And why I say it'll help solve your problem. What blue says is that, look, we don't know. This is pretty dramatic stuff. What you do then is study. And by study, I mean, you make, let's say, I deal with a lot of early stage businesses. They've got a new product or service. All right, build a simple example of it. Make a video clip of it. Try to have the least, we call it the least expensive model. You can do 3D printing of everything nowadays. Testing is the key. So even if it's disruptive behavior or disruptive innovation, if you make simple models, I had one guy, he worked for GE Medical. He had come up with a new way of doing brain scans during the middle of an operation, and you had to move the patient because surgeons operating on your brain, they need to know what's going on inside that brain. Well, the only way you can do that is take an MRI. Well, how do you do that when the person's on the operating? Well, he had come up with a shoot that you move the patient while they're on the operating table into the machine that studies the brain. Now that thing costs $25 million to build. So what he did is made a video of it. And that was enough to attract investors to see how it operated and then to bank it and make it happen. So how can you buy the minimum viable product, the least expensive way of testing the idea? So greens are for the simple ones, blue where they have to study, but blue is all about, okay, you've got an it's incrementally, it's exciting, it's gonna be disruptive. All right, let's make a simple test. And then you get some of your customers involved. I mean, a financial product services company, what are you going to be offering, whatever it is, then you put it in front of a few of your customers, make them part of your jury, I hate to mention that word these days, but to sort of give you feedback. They become your first customers, by the way. So take the time to test those things. Even as simple as redecorating our living room, having the interior designer come over with her paint samples and everything. Within an hour, she proved to us she had a winning solution. So we saw, it was a test case. She did it on the spot. So the idea is test, keep testing, keep pivoting, keep testing, keep pivoting till you get it right. Because you're right, disruptive takes a lot. And in your industry, disruptive is always a challenge. And then some will be so crazy you can scratch them. But that's a way of taking the creativity and bringing it home to, okay, let's make this practical. And the small incremental test involving potential customers, getting their feedback, the gold standard.
That's helpful, very helpful. And it reminds me of, and I won't be able to recite it verbatim, but Jim Collins' Good to Great and the concept of, what I'm remembering is sort of a rifle approach, rifle, and then you get out the big cannon. And just so basically the same thing you're saying, test it out, refine it, and then go big.
There are some people like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs that are so smart, such great geniuses, that they have insights that the rest of us mortals don't have. If you are a potential Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, well, you're not going to need any of this. You're just going to come up with disruptive solutions the world has yet to see. But for the rest of us mortals, this gives you a framework and a very disciplined, and Steve, since I work with global companies, many of them are family businesses, I've seen this work on how to decide to keep a plant in Germany or not, but which requires a lot of creativity. But there's a discipline I'm focused on personal creativity today, but I do workshops, like I say, for businesses so they can have a framework, and it's all focused. The column I write is called Innovate or Die. It's all about businesses that innovated enough to avoid going out of business, as many have during this pandemic. So other questions on how this process works that come to mind? This is free for all time. So now let me point out, we can go to the next slide. And to sort of come to wrapping this up, all of us see the world from a different standpoint. The guy on the right sees a boat, and then the other guy sees land. It's our world. So when problems come to you, and even if it's a devastating problem, even if it's a horrible problem, even like I ended up in a COVID bed, thinking, God, I could die tonight. These are not things you should say, oh, how unfortunate, how sad that I got hit with this problem. No, life is made up of problems. You can't escape them, and you can see them as problems that discourage you, or you can see them as opportunities. I like this next slide because it sort of tells us the choice that all of us go through. That is, when tragedy strikes or problems solve, whatever it may be in life, you can suffer post-traumatic syndrome, which is a very, very real thing, PTS, or post-traumatic growth. I've seen it happen both ways. And it's really your life. And all I say to you is you think about taking this little secret sauce of creativity with you, and my cookbook, so to speak, is the whole purpose is to help you navigate life. I do this because I love to do it. I see the joy of creativity and helping people survive life in families, in businesses, in the work world, and in your own personal life. So as you go through life, take what I've shown you, take that little workbook and start trying and practicing it, and then do it with your family, and eventually do it with people at work. But trust me, in the long run, you're going to live a more interesting, creative life. And the last thing I'm going to say, unequivocally, and I say this with great passion, think about those little children who played with toys, who learned to speak, who learned to walk, the pure joy they took in becoming more creative as little human beings. That is in all of us. So as you do this, as you practice it, you are going to take the pure joy. It's not easy. Many times it's not easy. I don't care if it's a new golf swing, or learning a new skill on a computer, whatever it is. There's work involved. But just think of the joy and satisfaction when you have it happen. You get great joy and satisfaction of having paid the price to become a more creative person. So there, I've worn myself out, and I need a nap. So, Catherine, do I get nap time?
Yes.
She'll put my contact information on the screen in a second. I'm always happy because most of what I do is in the world of organizations and family businesses, helping them as a group navigate the brutal problems they go through all the time, and teaching them a framework of tools and creativity to navigate their problems. All right, I've worn myself out. Thanks, Catherine.
Kim, you had a question?
No, I was clapping.
Oh, you were clapping. Okay. Good. So any questions from anyone? Thoughts? Discussion?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I will say, just sitting through this presentation actually gave me more confidence in things that I'm already currently doing that I didn't realize that I was doing that was creative, if that makes sense. So I appreciate the confidence booster that at least I was doing more things than I realized that I didn't realize I was doing. So thank you.
And you're
I'll just continue to develop that.
And you're coming to us from your own woman cave, I so to speak. That alone was a creative act. And by the way, getting back to Steve, one of the things I did, I ran a financial services company, huge. I've got my securities licenses. I know all of that world. I grew a new mutual fund. I actually created a room, much like Kim has done, and it was called the Creativity Room. And in it, we had, you know, signs like sacred cows make great hamburgers. Literally had a creativity room with, you know, more relaxed seating and funny things on the wall and Post-its and all this stuff. So when you went in that room, you knew you know, humor video to stimulate it, to emphasize the importance of the creative process within an organization. So Kim, you've already done it in your own personal life. And I think having that is, it was a huge statement about the importance of solitude, being quiet, and letting your creative brain work. So you don't even need to attend this session. You can teach it.
Well, I wish I knew though beforehand how expensive a shed was going to be during COVID.
Yeah. That's because, well, you didn't know how to do a matrix. And matrix is a factor.
I shot before I ready aimed.
Welcome to the crowd.
So we have Dan's information up there for you all.
Thanks, Catherine. And by the way, Catherine is, when I first read about some of the things she's done, I thought this woman's on creativity steroids, for crying out loud. She would never need this session. It's just hardwired into her genetic composition. And she's done things, the lobster thing was just so weird and cool. So, but you thought outside the box, so anyhow.
Well, and it's a team effort because Brooke helps me and the board helps me, and Steve is always great in programs because he likes to push bass. So it's really fun that we get to do this. And I've been having great conversations with Dan. I mean, we both lived in Africa, we did other things, so it's been really fun, and I really wanted to bring this to you all. And we put the survey link in the chat. If you could please fill that out, that helps us build our programs. And I wanted to thank our sponsors, KeyBank and Maine HR Convention and Maine Biz. And also Dan, because I just love talking with you and having fun with you and we laugh. It was funny when he put the videos up. We had some other ones. I'm crying, laughing and thinking it's really, and then Brooke's a little more analytical and she's like, I survived. I'm just laughing, you know, like, yeah, nobody was hurt doing these programs.
So Brooke, no, a ship didn't really sink out in the North Atlantic. So you can sleep better. You can sleep better now.
My water phobia got to me.
Yeah, so we had fun with that. And I like to have humor. I once worked in a job where I got in trouble for laughing, and I was like, really? I'm like, come on, guys. So I think it's important to put that into your life because life is.
Isn't that sad, Catherine, knowing that? Yeah. Getting humor stimulates thinking on the right side of the brain, which leads to creative solutions. And you know, Google hardwires it into their campus out in Cupertino, or as does Apple. They hardwire creativity, humor into their actual corporate physical environment. They've learned the hard way that you have to build humor into your daily life. And that's the way creative solutions come. So, and by the way, life is more fun if you add some more humor to it. It can be, it's too short otherwise. So.
That's what we always try. We try to have a little bit of fun and a takeaway. And I think it's a great job of that for us. So we have a workbook, and I think, Steve, we can use this matrix for our programming committee that we want to look forward and think about improving that process as we pick our various programs.
That's a good point. It gives you a framework. As Steve said, it isn't meant to be scientific, but at least it gives you a framework. And then throwing in humor allows the team to work and kid each other. And it allows people to be more audacious and say things that might be considered outrageous, but if you're laughing, having fun together, who cares? And that leads to some of the best ideas you will ever come up with. So it's really about changing the culture. And the HR person I talked to earlier, HR people should be, I've talked to HR groups all the time because they're in charge in part of culture and creating a culture that you're allowed to have fun, enjoy yourself. It leads to better business decisions in a family. Wow, that's the gold standard because HR people are credible to the culture of any organization.
And that brings us to legal lunches next Thursday. We'll hear what the lawyers say we can and cannot do. And then we can hear from Dottie and hear what her real life experiences are. So that'll be fun.
I told Catherine, I apologize, but in my youth, I was a lawyer, recovering lawyer. I went to Boston University Law School on the East Coast in Boston and loved it. So I always describe myself now as I became a lawyer and then eventually ended up heading a financial institution, but I always describe myself now as a recovering lawyer. So good luck with the lawyers, but tell that lawyer, tell us how we do things, not what we can't do. How do we get things done? That was always a client. I know what you want to do. Let me get you there legally and not tell you what you can't do. So challenging.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Steve.
And we'll be sending out a follow-up email with the recording and the workbook and Dan's contact too for everybody. So you can look